All right, look. You knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be bad. And, wow. This is... I think I'd like to call out one thing in particular before I really start tearing into this one, because I think this aspect of the movie is going to get lost in the pile of bullshit that is the Twilight Saga : New Moon. And I kind of wish I had a co-host here for this one, but after watching the movie, the Lady Scarlet said she kind of needed to be alone for a little while, so acting kind of weird, so I let her go. Don't know what she's doing. Spent a lot of time in the bathroom. Anyway, the one thing I'd like to point out is is this or is this not the absolute worst soundtrack in any movie in history? Seriously, at least I didn't like the soundtrack to the first Twilight, and I didn't listen to it, but I actually do own the movie for riff tracks. By the way, the riff tracks of Twilight is really awesome. But the soundtrack had, Muse. It was relatively inoffensive, except for the Paramore tracks that were on it. But anyway, you could see why people liked it. This soundtrack is just god-awful boring, and just it's just like the entirety of it that I remember is just morose, atonal moaning. And it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it actually saps energy out of the movie, and energy is what this 2-hour and 10-minute abomination desperately needed to keep it moving. Like, I remember, the one scene I really remember for the whole thing is, they're chasing this red-headed vampire, Victoria, through the woods. These werewolves are chasing her around, and, they're knocking down trees, they're chasing people, like, there's a vampire choke-slamming Indians, and you're like, this is gonna be really awesome! And so, like, the chase music they chose to play is just like, there's werewolves in the woods, and they're chasing a vampire, And it's like, you'd expect some kind of, like, orchestral score, you'd expect something, like, really, heavy, or bombastic, or booming, or, like, Carl Orfish, Carmina Burana-esque, or something thrilling, something to push the action forward. It's just like pop music, and it's not even, I wouldn't even call it pop music, it's just like, it's just whining, just moaning sounds, and that's not a score. It's really bad when I can, like, single out the orchestral score and the soundtrack as being just real boat anchors around this fucking movie, where you think, like, maybe if the music was at all moving, you could, like, make at least just some decent montages. And there's a montage. It's so bad. And, at least you could say that was okay, but the music wasn't bad. The music is one of the worst parts of this, and that is saying quite a lot. And it's hard to know really where to start with this movie. So I guess I'm going to start with the beginning. And, yeah, this is going to be one of those long ones, and I'm not going to go quite as long as the movie, what possibly could, except, like, you know what? Lord of the Rings was 3 hours. If you're pushing Lord of the Rings territory, Twilight ain't it. Okay? And I remember the first thing that really starts out was Bella wakes up, and right next to her is a copy of Romeo and Juliet, like, gigantic, like, the hardcover edition of Romeo and Juliet. I was like, subtle. Very subtle. And they're studying this in class, but wow. You're actually comparing this to Romeo and Juliet. And so, Bella is having dreams that one day she'll become old, and Edward will stay his same dreamy self till the end of time, and when she's a grandma, Edward will not be sexually attracted to Grandma Bella. And I don't think you know Edward that well, but anyway, she's having basically like a midlife crisis at 18. And this says all sorts of codependent things about Bella, which have already pretty much gone over. And I have problems with Bella, and besides her codependency issues, I'll get back to that, but basically it's her birthday. And so they go to the Cullens place, the Cullens house, Shea Cullen, and they start giving her gifts. And over the course of opening these gifts, she, like, fucking gashes her finger open on the wrapping paper, and this, of course, you know, the vampires, it sets them off. You know, they're like sharks with blood in the water, and so they're all pretty much holding it together because they're the good kind of vampires, except for Harpo, kind of the crazy-haired new guy who is always like he's kind of like the Chihuahua of the group, where his eyes are always like. And so, like, when the blood hits the carpet, he's like, and like, Edward sees this coming. Like, Edward sees, like, oh, shit, about to hit the fan. Gonna be bad. So, since Edward's very protective, and Harpo is like, he's like, I have to save Bella. I have to save Bella. Harpo starts charging across the room at vampiric speed, so everything stopped. Everything slows into, like, Matrix bullet time, because they're moving so fast. And so, Edward's first instinct to protect Bella is to give, like, the most world-class, vampiric speed, stiff arm to the face to Bella, like, ever. And this stiff arm sends her cartwheeling ass over tea kettle across the fucking room into, like, a boudoir or something like this. Kind of like that scene in Belly of the Beast where Steven Seagal slaps the dude across the room. Like, Edward does this to her. Like, I have to save you, Bella! Fuck out the way! And so she crashes into this furniture, snaps her spine, gashes her arm open, and that really helps the vampire situation when you've actually, like, sent her hurling into plate glass, slashing her arm open. So, like, Harpo is like, just... So they drag him out of the room. The Cullen patron, whatever his name is, the guy who dresses like Fred from Scooby-Doo with the sweater and the sweater around the sweater and the neatly coiffed blonde hair, and like sews her up, and he's like, it's all right, you know, Harpo's like that, he's new. And so, but Edward is really shaken up by this. He's like, Edward, he's like, we got to get out of here. I cannot protect you from all the shit that's going down. I can't protect you from Harpo, so I'm going to abandon you to the vengeance-sworn red-headed vampire that's going to come kill you later. It didn't seem to cross his mind at that point. So she's like, you've got to change me into a vampire. He's like, no, I mustn't. It is taboo. And so he starts really trying to drive her away. Like, he's like, I have to leave you. I must go. And I'm taking my family with me. And she's like, no, but why? And so he makes up this bullshit story, like, he's like, you know, the Fred, or whatever the patron's name is, the doctor guy, he's like, it's been 10 years and he hasn't aged a day, and people are starting to ask questions, and remember this for later, because this is going to come up later. But he's like, I have to go, and you can't come with me. I can't save you, Bella, not from myself. And she's like, no, Edward, you mustn't go. I'm nothing without you. You're my world. And he's like, I have to go. I don't want you anymore, Bella. I hate you. I don't want you anymore. You're no good for me. And it's kind of like that scene from Old Yeller where, I don't even know, like the scene where the boy is trying to drive away the faithful dog. And the dog is like, no, I want to stay. And the boy's like, I hate you. I never wanted you. And like starts throwing rocks, you know, and Bella's like, no, please, no, and he's like, I have to go, and he runs off at vampiric speed, and Bella's like, oh my god, I'm empty without him, and so starts chasing after Edward through the woods. Like, Edward, where could you be? Edward, please come back. I'm like, hey, genius, have you tried his fucking house? He's like, where could Edward be? I'm guessing he went home to pack. You know, even at vampiric speed, it would probably take me a day or two. Just then. Or, I don't know, get a phone. Like, you're a teenage girl and you don't have a phone. Now, I understand you're living in the ass crack of Washington. Phones may not work in Forks, but I'm guessing they do. So, she is so insane with grief, and insane being the key word here, she runs around the woods like a dumbass and passes out from exhaustion. She spends so much time running around the fucking woods. She passes out, and I would hope die of exposure, but no. She is saved by the friendly shirtless werewolves, who just now happen to live in Forks. So, they, like, the father, who deals with more shit than I can ever imagine from this fucking stupid girl is like, he's called up the dragnet, you know, all of a sudden the werewolves come save her, and he's like, oh, thank God, Bella, you're back. And she's like, but my life is meaningless without Edward. And so what proceeds to happen is like 20 minutes more than that. Like the entire rest of the movie is her like moping around, fucking morose as shit, whining, complaining, just droning, tranced out bullshit. Where like there's a scene where she's literally sitting in a chair and the camera pans around her and it goes on for 3 months and it feels like 3 months. Like, how fucking codependent, helpless, worthless without a man are you? It's so fucking sexist. Like, is she completely worthless without this emotionally abusive, distant asshole of a boyfriend whose relationship has never seemed to go beyond the purely physical? That she is shut down without him. For some reason, this is true love, even though we've never been given any plausible explanation or emotional connection of any kind to believe this disaster of epic proportions that has rocked her teenage world. And so she falls mute. She trances for months. She wakes up screaming in agony in the middle of the night, and I am serious. Every night, she's like clutching at her stomach going, Edward! And the father, every night has to come in. Like, you could tell he's not getting any fucking sleep at all. Dealing with this for 3 months with this teenage melodrama bullshit. And this is what gets to me about Bella, is that she is, without a doubt, the most hateful, loathsome, manipulative, shallow cock tease of a whore I think I have ever seen in a movie. Like, you know, Gordon Gekko was a bastard who was obsessed with money, had no feelings for others, but at least you knew where he was coming from. He had redeeming qualities. He was a smart guy. Bella is horrible as a person. Absolutely horrible. And not only is her entire world defined only by the men that she is manipulating and is possessed by, she proceeds to endlessly pine over this guy, manipulating, cock-teasing, like, taking the hearts out of these guys who inexplicably seem to like her, want to understand her, want to like her, and she proceeds to manipulate them into doing favors for her, spending weeks upon weeks working for her, doing, like, her bullshit menial tasks, with the promise that she might, like, eventually warm up to them, and she doesn't. She's always like, I can never be close to you. I miss him. And she's so selfish in this regard that she could easily just tell these guys, like, I'm only interested in being with you as a friend, or, like, I'm really holding out hope for Edward here. But no, she like, teases these guys. She leads them on. She's like, you know, this Jacob guy really wants to help her out, like, really wants to protect her. And he's like, I'll always be there for you, Bella. You're my friend. And she's like, great. You know, I found these motorcycles in the junkyard. They'll cost thousands of dollars to fix and endless months of labor. And would you just fix them for me? And Jacob is like, I don't know. And she's like, please. He's like, oh, all right, because I'm a stupid guy and I'll do anything you say. And so he proceeds to put in all this work, all this time and effort, takes her to movies, you know, does all this really nice shit for her, and she proceeds to just lead it, like, just totally destroy this guy emotionally. And, like, it's horrible watching this to this guy, because you're really meant to side with Bella in this whole thing. You're really meant to be like, why doesn't Edward come back? Why doesn't he understand? Why doesn't like, she always is meant for Edward. And, like, she's a bitch! She's nothing but a manipulative bitch! And, I really feel objectified here. I really feel like Stephenie Meyer doesn't get anybody. Man, woman, anybody. Not only are the women weak-willed, like, shallow, horrible people who only want to be possessed by men, the men themselves are stupid, ignorant, just, like, nothing but sex objects. And, by the way, you cannot convince me that Bella's interest in any of these men is anything other than purely sexual, which makes the romance and the supposed, like, one true love thing about Edward all the more meaningless and unbelievable, because you don't believe that, like, he always seems like he's in pain. And I don't know if it's Pattinson's acting or the direction or what, but Pattinson looks like he is seriously, like, he hasn't shit in 3 weeks. And he's like, he always looks like he is just in horrible, horrible agony this whole time. And it's really uncomfortable to watch. Because you're like, are you okay, dude? Is like, it really looks like, it looks like he's actually, like, to work himself up for these scenes, like he's jamming a fork into his thigh. Where he's just, he looks so tortured, and maybe that's the point. Like, maybe he's, like, torn between his bloodlust and wanting to save her. Am I giving too much credit to the acting or the script? But Pattinson, who I know can do better than this, he looks constipated, and he looks like fucking years constipated, and I just don't get it. And what else? I'm trying to think. I remember what I was getting on. Where this really gets ridiculous and where it really gets funny is where she is totally lost her damn mind, Bella. Like, there's no doubting that even other people are like, you are fucking out of your mind. Where, like, she starts seeing spectral visions of Edward, kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi that kind of appears out of smoke and mist. And like, the only time she sees this spectral vision of Edward is when she is, like, she kind of becomes an adrenaline junkie, where every time she feels like she's in danger, or she's scared, or she's doing something incredibly stupid, this ghost of Edward appears and tries to warn her. Like, the ghost goes, like, okay, she'll be walking down the street, and she'll see a bunch of bikers who are like, hey, baby, woo, woo! And so this ghost goes, walk away. She's like, what? They're dangerous. You need to run. And she's like, no. And so she goes over and she, like, whores herself out to these bikers and, like, goes on a ride. And so they're, like, on the motorcycle, and she's like, this is great. This is wonderful. And, like, the ghost of Edward appears. He's like, you're not wearing a helmet. And she's like, ah! And so she gets off the bike, but she's like, this is the only way I'll see Edward is in my fucked up hallucinations, so I have to provoke more fucked up hallucinations by acting like a complete suicidal tool. So she does this. So she builds these motorcycles because they're the most suicidal crotch rocket thing she can think of to do with her life. So she gets on these motorcycles, and she starts to rev up the motorcycle, and the ghost of Edward is like, motorcycles are dangerous. Get off. And she's like, I'm gonna ride this motorcycle, and so she starts driving the motorcycle really fast, and Edward is like, before she goes up, he's like, go the speed limit. So she's like driving really fast down the dirt road, and he's like, be careful, the dirt road's uneven. And she's driving along, and all of a sudden, like, the spectral ghosts of Edward are like they're like standing on the side of the road, and she's passing by him really fast, and the ghosts of Edward are like, they're like, don't ride the clutch. Or like, this is really messing up your hair. Wear a helmet. And so she crashes the fucking motorcycle because she kind of, like, you gotta get the intention she intends to crash the motorcycle. We're like, look how you're gonna crash the motorcycle. And so she slams her head into a rock. And so Jacob, the werewolf guy, who is standing by this whole time, he's like, oh my god, Bella, what the fuck are you doing? And so, like, she's all bleeding. She's like, I have to get back on the bike. And she's like bleeding from her head, and he's like, I have to keep riding, I miss him. And the ghost of Edward's like, stay off the motorcycle. Don't get on the motorcycle. It's crazy. And so Jacob runs up to her. He's like, oh my God, what are you doing? He's like, hang on, you're bleeding. He's like, you're bleeding from the head. So he's like, and so he takes his shirt off, and this dude is like rippling, okay? The dude, he looks like the Harlequin romance novel covers, you know? And so, like, it's seriously, like, it was really funny to hear, like, all the women in the room at that moment just went, oh. I'd never heard women make that sound. It was like waving a milk bone in front of hungry dogs. They're like, I was like, that's awesome. And I was like, from this moment on, let's not even pretend why we're all here, okay? That's it. That is why. There's like, you wanted to see the muscles, okay? I get that. But let's not pretend like this is a good story. Let's not even dream that you're here because this is of any kind of serious tension. You're here for the pecs. You're here for the six-pack. In fact, this guy's got so many abs, he's got like an 8-pack. He's got the, he's got the full-on cube, you know. This guy, you could really do like laundry on his abs. This guy's amazing. And of course, she has to comment on his awesome body like every time that fucking sees him. Like, he's like, wow, biceps, you know. So he takes his shirt off. He's like, you gotta dab this blood off with my shirt. And so all the women are like, oh. And he's like, oh, you're bleeding from your hand. Let me take my pants off. And so he takes his pants off and wraps it around her hand. And he's like, oh, your nose is bleeding. I'm gonna take my underwear off. And so there's no clothes left, you know. So of course. And actually, when I said that, I kind of lied before. You know what? I said that Stephenie Meyer didn't understand men, women, or anything. For a Mormon, she actually gets gay men quite well. And that surprised me, because I thought that kind of lifestyle was relatively incompatible. Now, this is my own ignorance shining through, but she really gets it. And by gays, I mean werewolves. And if you seriously think I'm making this up, I'm not. This is like the most paper-thin allegory for gayness that I think I've seen since the X-Men. Where, with the X-Men, it was kind of hinted that, like mutants equals homosexuals. And you're kind of like... It was a neat little symbol there, and you got it. It didn't beat you over the head with it, right? You were, the one time somebody was like, have you ever tried not being a mutant? But in this one, the werewolves save Bella from the dreadlock vampire, and she's mad. She's like, how can you do that? He's like, Jacob's like, it was a vampire. It was a monster. And she's like, you're a monster too. You're a werewolf. That's disgusting. He's like, what? He's like, she says, can't you just stop being a werewolf? And I kid you not, this is where I get the whole gay metaphor thing from, is Jacob spins around looking wounded. He's like, you don't understand, Bella. This isn't a lifestyle choice I'm making. I was born this way. And turns away. And she's like, but it's not what you are. It's what you do. And it's filthy and disgusting. And he's like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go back to my 5 male shirtless friends and play grab-ass in the woods. And I'm not exaggerating either when I say they play grab-ass, because there is a scene in this movie where they're fixing the motorcycles, and these 2 shirtless Indian guys, they walk in, and they're like, oh, hey, Jacob, who's your girlfriend? Breeder. And Jacob is like, I told you, she's not my girlfriend. She's a girl who happens to be my friend. And they're like, yeah, I'll show you who's a girlfriend. Tickle fight! And they start they roughhouse, the gayest roughhousing. Okay, shirtless dudes, unless you happen to be gay, should never, engage in shirtless wrestling. And these guys must go through, you know what, fine, shirtless wrestle, I don't care, whatever you want to do, it doesn't hurt anybody, I don't care. But these guys must go through more shorts and more pants, when they erupt into the big fake CG wolves. And I think, by the way, the director must really get off on this thing, having like CG creatures fight each other, because this guy's the same guy who did the Golden Compass, who did the polar bear fight, which I thought was actually pretty cool. But okay, enough with the CG animals fighting each other, right? That leads me to Edward, by the way, who, you're like, Edward is not in this movie for all that much of it. So Edward is in. If he's not in Italy, he's going to Italy, because at some point he believes that Bella is dead. I don't know how. And so he's like, I have to kill myself. And so apparently he doesn't have the balls to kill himself, but he doesn't mind other people doing it for him. So he wants to go to Italy and piss off the ancient vampires called the Volturi. And by pissing them off, they'll kill him. Like, he couldn't just jump out in front of a train, or, like, jump off a building, or find some way to cut his own head off, which, you know, if you have hundreds of years at your disposal, that probably wouldn't be as hard as you might think. But his plan, and you're going to love this, is he has to commit a vampire crime. And vampires don't have crimes, but the one crime they do have is revealing their existence, that vampires exist, to people, or like killing people in front of other people. Like, if you lead on those vampires, they'll kill you. So his plan is to strip down nude and step out in front of a parade in the middle of Italy at noon. So that will reveal the existence of vampires to the world. Now, if you don't know already, and you probably do, vampires sparkle. And I mean, they sparkle a lot. So apparently people are just going to walk out, see naked Edward sparkling like a lighthouse in the noonday sun, and they're going to think, vampire. Like, they're going to see a sparkling man and think it's a vampire. You wouldn't think it's just like a living statue or a mime or just some pasty guy with way too much body glitter on. I don't know, but like, they're going to be like, that's a vampire. And kill, like, you would just think it's a crazy man covered in body glitter. You wouldn't be like, vampire! Ah! But this is his plan. So, like, the plot contrivance vampire, I think her name is Alice, who has the convenient gift to see the future, except the future where it might help the story at all. She decides, like, Edward is going to kill himself, so instead of going to Edward, whom I can see, and stop him that way, I'm going to go to Bella, who I know is alive, and warn her that Edward is going to kill himself. Instead of telling Edward that Bella's alive, and she knows Bella's alive. So Alice goes back to Forks, finds Bella, and is like, you gotta come to Italy, because Edward is gonna kill himself. Instead of doing something like holding up a fucking iPhone, or the digital camera that Bella's father gave her in the beginning of the movie, and like taking a picture with Bella together, and then emailing it to fucking Edward. Does Edward not have a phone? Does Edward not have email? Like, how far behind the times are you, man? Like, no, but she has to go to Italy to save him. And apparently Bella, being an 18-year-old girl, has a passport. Who knew? And can afford to fly to Italy. I guess the vampires covered it, but... And, I mentioned the werewolves chasing this redheaded vampire through. In the first movie, these vampires try to kill Bella because... And so, one of the vampires gets killed, and the other vampire, a redheaded vampire, vows revenge on Edward, and decides the best way to get revenge on Edward is to kill Bella. Edward knows this and leaves anyway, but whatever. So the werewolves are, like, they do one thing and they do it well, and that's kill vampires. They love it. You know, they love fucking killing vampires. And so they start chasing the redheaded vampire all over the place, and they have that chasing, chokes on the Indian guy. Indian guy dies, off camera, by the way. And the vampire jumps in the ocean and gets away. And you never see her again for the rest of the movie. She just vanishes. It's like a subplot that just they forget about. And I'm not kidding. This is like beginning of second act. You know, they chase this vampire into the water and she's gone. She just gives up. or something. And of course, like, Bella is for some reason out in the fucking woods, and she wants to go cliff jumping, into the jagged rocks below. And of course, the spectral version of the spectral vision of Edward is like, "Don't do it. Don't jump off the cliff, Bella. Don't do it." And she's like, "I have to jump in the water. I have to!" And so she, like, whips her shirt off. And it's not nearly as foxy as you think it is, because being a granola chick in Washington, she's wearing, like, 4 layers of clothes. So she takes off a layer. So she's like, "I have to jump in the water. I miss you." And Edward is like, "The water's going to be really cold." And she's like, "I don't care." And he's like, "It's going to totally ruin your hair." She's like, "I don't care," and she jumps in the water, and then, of course, she gets up, and she has to go to Italy. And in Italy, Edward is like, "I'm gonna fucking piss off these Volturi." So he goes to see him, and he's like, "Are you gonna kill me or what?" And the Volturi are like, "No!" He's like, "Okay, fuck you," and Watt runs off. And so, of course, Bella comes in and saves him and, like, covers his glittering body, and nobody thinks vampire. Nobody would have thought vampire, but nobody does now. And so the Volturi are really curious about Bella, so they're like, "We have to see her." And so they bring all the vampires in there, and of course there's 3 Volturi who, the life of a Volturi must be just really, really boring, because they like have this, they have a monument, like they live in, like, this Italian ruin, like, it's just, they sit in these thrones, like, all day. There's 3 thrones, and there's, like, there's a really prissy-looking, bleach blonde dude who sits off to the side and says nothing. There's a really bored-looking guy who looks like Tommy Wiseau, who says nothing. He says a few things, but he's doing his own thing. And then there's this really effeminate, like, posturing, kind of almost Dr. Insano-ish type Volturi vampire who's just endlessly amused by his wickedness. And so, like, apparently all vampires have a mutant power who, like, they all do really weird things, by the way. Like, Edward can read minds, and Alice can see the future, and the guy who's the doctor who looks like Fred from Scooby-Doo, he does something. And so the Volturi are like, "So, you're the Bella that Edward keeps going on and on about. Say, my vampiric power is I can read every thought you've ever had in your mind just by touching you. Do you mind if I do that?" And so Bella's like, "All right," and so gives him his hand, and he's like, "How fascinating. I can't read you at all." And the bored-looking vampire is like, "Can we please get on with this? You already know what we're going to do. I'm so bored." And the effeminate guy is like, "Oh, do pipe down. I'm in the middle of a scene here." And so they, like, for some reason they decide that Bella has to die. They're like, "I'm afraid, my dear, that you know too much. And so while you may be immune to our vampiric powers, we can still tear your face off." Ciao. And so they decide to go fight it out. And Edward is like, "No, I have to defend Bella." And so they fight. And it's all very awkward and unclear, and they're all moving at vampiric speed, and Bella is, of course, just a piece of baggage this whole time. And seriously, she might as well just be a cardboard standee with a handle at this point, because she is such a decoration. She is essentially like a shoulder bag for these men who, like, what's slaying about this one is she owns this truck, and she's the only person in this whole world who doesn't drive her own truck. Like, is she such a delicate flower? Is she such a helpless, useless woman that she can't drive her own truck? Like, all these men have to do it for her. It really slays me. And so, I don't even remember how they finally convince the vampires to not kill Bella. At one point, they're like, Edward gets in the way, and, like, against his better nature, does not shoulder check her into a marble column. But they're about to kill Edward, and she's like, "No! Don't kill him! Kill me! I love him!" And the vampire was like, "How fascinating. You would kill yourself instead of allowing one of us soulless monsters to be destroyed." And she's like, "Yes, he's noble and good. And my God, he looks good without his shirt off." And the vampire is like, "Yes, he does, doesn't he? Very well. as long as you become a vampire, you can live. And like you think I'm joking? He really is the kind of guy who's like, and like he's like, I'm going to go up on my throne and watch Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. Come along, you two. Let's make muffins. And by the way, there are muffins in this movie, like 5-pound fucking muffins. Long story. So, of course, they go back. They go back to Forks. And remember when I said that whole story about how it was like they had to leave because the doctor wasn't aging and people were asking questions? The Cullens just decided to go back to Forks because fuck it. You know, so like they're all gonna move back, and I don't know how they're gonna resolve this whole thing with the doctor not aging, but maybe they'll just try makeup or like graying out his hair. So they're like, and so this whole situation with Edward and Jacob continues, like it keeps talking, and so she is always going on and on and on about, you have to make me a vampire, you have to, Edward, it's the only way, and he's like. I don't want to fucking do this. He's like, please, I'll never shut up about this, Edward. He's like, can you give me 5 years? Because I think that's about as long as it'll take for me to find out a way to dump your ass for good this time. He's like, no, I have to, Edward, please. So Jacob finally comes out, shirtless, of course. He spends his whole fucking movie shirtless. Although, I guess if I looked like this guy, I would spend most of my time shirtless, too. I don't know. And so he's like, Jacob is like, I won't let you take her. You can't. And this whole time, of course, Bella is still not being honest with him, still leading him hopelessly on, like dangling the carrot of hope in front of him, like just maybe he might be able to convince her to dump this fruity Edward guy and, you know, roll with the dogs. And by that I mean, there's so many scenes in this movie where she's like, I'm so alone, I miss him, and Jacob is like, he's trying to work his mojo, and like, you know, he's like, maybe you'll feel better speaking into the microphone here, and like, she's like, and like, how about the second, I got the backup mic right here, and she's like, you know, and so there's so many, there's like 2 or 3 scenes where they're like just about to kiss, you know, those scenes where like they're just about to and something stupid happens, like somebody like kicks on the door and is like, I made muffins, or they're just about to kiss and the phone rings and somebody calls up and says like, I made muffins, come over, and there's like 3 scenes about that, and so there'll be scenes where like she's talking about how much she misses Edward as she is rubbing his abs. You know, you just like, how is he supposed to, like, this is the very definition of mixed fucking signals that you've ever seen in a movie, where all she had to do is like, look, Jacob, there's no shot, okay? I know it's sad, I know it's pathetic, but I love the pasty bastard, and you know, he wouldn't have to like it, but at least he wouldn't hold out hope. Okay, there's she just has him by the balls. And I don't know how you can not see this as, like, just manipulating this guy. This guy is so hopeless and so stupid that why is she worth it? What about her is so goddamn special? She doesn't seem all that smart. She's not all that attractive. She's not funny. She's not... There's nothing about her that is special, you know. You'd think maybe that, like, of all the women that Edward has seen in hundreds of years of life, that why her? Why settle? Like, he really is settling. There are so many hotter chicks in the vampire world that he'd be much better, like, because he can't read her mind. Who gives a shit? You know what? Maybe it's the fact that you can't. It's not the fact that you can't read her mind. Maybe you are, and there just ain't nothing in there. Because I think that's the more likely explanation. It's like a bean rolling around in a salad bowl up there. I don't know. What else do I say about this? Like, how long have I gone on? I have no idea. Yeah, like I said, I've got no one to blame but myself for seeing this movie, but I knew it was going to be really bad. But you know what? It was really funny. I cannot deny the fact that this is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life, but it is way too goddamn long. It was worth watching. You know what? Go see this movie. I encourage you to go see it. I have completely lost my goddamn mind, but seriously, it's a great comedy. I laughed my ass off. And if you are a girl and you are itching for some softcore man meat, go see this movie. If you're a gay dude and you want to see some man meat, there are few movies that are more proud to be gay than this one. Because you will see more beefy American Indian abs, pecs, and muscles. It's just like dudes flexing. Like, this movie is 2 hours long. 2 hours of it is just American Indian dudes, like, just like, curling. You know, like, doing ab crunches and, like, just strutting around in blue jeans and nothing else. And, like, if that sounds good to you, power to you guys, because they might as well call this movie, like, Native Americans in blue jeans, and that's it. Like, and that would have sold it, you know. They should call it New Moon and just showed, like, Native American asses, and you'd have been like, yeah. But for all the movies that I've ever seen where, like, you can complain that this objectifies women, or this, like, women are nothing more than sex objects in this movie. This is, like, I'm trying to think of a movie that you can compare this to that does to women what, you know, this movie does for men. And, like, I can only think of, like, Ultraviolet, or, you know, Ultraviolet, which was, it was a movie based entirely about Mila Jovovich's ass, or Underworld, which is, the only reason that movie is made is to, again, a topless male werewolf dude, like a big, hairy, like, just studly guy, and Kate Beckinsale in bondage leather. Like, they made, like, 3 movies around this. They're like, this Kate Beckinsale in bondage leather is good enough to make 3 movies about it, and they do that. And they're like, if that's not good enough for you, we got, like, hairy dudes just shirtless, like, flexing. But is this... I have to judge it on its merits, because that's what's hard about reviewing movies like this, is because it sucks. You know it sucks. And girls who read this shit deep down know it sucks. But when you get right down to it and you admit what it is, and you're like, what is this movie? It's porn for girls. It's a Harlequin romance novel in movie form. And I'm like, I have to judge it on that merit. I guess I do. Because if I judge it as a movie that, like, you would never go see this movie. Like, is it a good vampire movie? No. Is it a good romance movie? No. Is it a comedy? Like, it's not intentionally a comedy. Like, what kind of movie is it? It's a movie about Native American dudes with their shirts off. Does it do that well? Yeah. But, you know what? It's always a really rough spot for me with a lot of horror movies and movies that are about, like, you know, movies that are basically based entirely around, like, the titty shot. Like, the one really brief, fleeting glimpse of titties. Species. The entire Species series is essentially about, like, seeing a woman momentarily topless, humping a dude, and turning into an alien. And, you know, if you're just in these movies to see titties, and you might be, but why do you torture yourself? Like, there are so many movies that are, like, PG-13 that are ostensibly about, you know, titties, or, like, college humor where there are titties thrown in, but they don't show titties. Where they kind of cheat out on the bare asses and the bare breasts and things like that. So you have to ask yourself, like, what's the point? Why are you bothering to lead us down the sex path if you're not going to actually deliver the sex? You're not going to give us the titties. And, like, my argument is always, like, if I wanted to watch porn, I'll watch porn. Porn is not as hard to get as it used to be, I think. It's a Google search away. I don't have to put up with shitty movies to see porn. Do you follow me at all? You know, back in the day, you wanted to see titties. You know, going to see a Friday the 13th movie or going to see a shitty slasher movie was a pretty safe bet. You were going to see titties. And so you would kind of understand if you were looking at it purely for stroke material, but the world has evolved. You know, we've got the internet. You want to see titties, you type the word titties in, and bam, there's titties delivered. All shapes, all sizes, some with horses. And in this regard, if you're a girl, you're a guy, you want to see some beefy slabs of muscle, I guess. If you really have to see Robert Pattinson shirtless, I guess. But just Google it. It's so worthless. It's so shallow. It's so pointless. And if you're hoping to see hot chicks, they exist in this movie, but they don't show you nothing. You know, there's no titties in this movie. There's man titties, lots of man titties, but like even if you're in it for like for the dudes, Google it. God, I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry. This is so monumentally bad. And yet you can't say it's a total failure because it does. Like if you're in it for this, God, I'm sorry. I'm off my game. This is a really bad movie, and it's 3:05 at night, in the morning, whatever. Back to work on reviews, I guess. That was New Moon.